Jésabel DC, welcome to the Star Coach Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we have to have you because you're going to talk about these important things like how organized are we digitally and like what's the process? And oh my goodness, I know for myself, to heck with my audience, I love this topic and need this topic, but I also know I'm not really saying the heck with you audience because I know that this is what's important for all of us. So super excited. Let me tell everybody a little bit about you, what we're going to be focused on, and why I thought it was important for you to come to the Star Coach Show. I sort of implied that already. I think that as coaches, we work really hard on the client relationship. We work hard on delivering our coaching. And sometimes it's the business end of it or the office part of it, the organizational part of it that can either feel overwhelming or just kind of get put to the back burner. And when it gets put to the back burner, I think it ends up making our job much harder, making the client, it negatively impacts the client partnership if we don't have our stuff together, let's just say. So in that, I was excited when I was introduced to you and thought, yes, I want this woman to come on the show. So let me tell everybody about what Jésabel does. She's a digital organizational coach, and she helps entrepreneurs and creatives turn their chaotic digital space. Can I hear an amen to that? Like, how many of us are like, yes, our digital spaces are chaotic, whether it's your inbox, your calendar, your digital files, into organized, and ready for this? Playful spaces that you actually want to spend time in. Everybody just absorb that for a minute and you will understand why I wanted to have Jésabel here. We're going to create organized, playful spaces that you actually want to spend time in. Now, how does Jésabel do that? Well, she created the Lifestyle Lab as a way to help people reduce their digital anxiety through one-on-one organizational sessions, workshops, and classes. We will have links for how to connect with all the great work she does and for you to follow up with Jésabel in the show notes. If you're watching us on YouTube, it's right below this video. But with all of that, everybody now is as excited as I was to have you on the show. So Jésabel, welcome to the Star Coach Show once again.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about this. It's funny because it's like I have the digital organization aspect, but I'm also a coach. So in that sense, I really connected with your podcast, and yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Super excited. And I think you know by being both what you do digitally and being a coach, I'm sure you bump into coaches a lot who just don't prioritize this and then end up, okay, let me just use myself as an example. I could literally spend 10 minutes looking for a file that should be at my fingertips, and that's 10 minutes that I could have done something else with at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I'm alone, huh?
No,
No.
no.
So we're going to start with this concept of digital nesting. Let's talk digital nesting. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll explain the origins of non-digital nesting. So essentially in nature, that would be when a pregnant human or animal prepares their environment or modifies their environment to adapt to the life with their new child. Um, and this kind of is a process that comes naturally to us. In a digital format, what that looks like is we get a new computer, right? Or we get set up with a new inbox or a new calendar or whatever platform it is digitally. And we don't really naturally feel the need or know that we can even modify that space. So what happens is the default settings that we get set up with, we take those as is and we just continue on with our lives. But the issue is that developers who design these platforms, the default settings are made so that you really see everything that's available to you. But as an individual, you don't need every single thing, especially in an information heavy space. So what tends to happen is that, you get a lot of information overload. You're seeing every single thing and you're easily distracted. Um, my style of organization, I really like to have my clients go towards a more, I call it low tech. And what that means is I tend to go towards platforms that are simpler. I tend to have them even in a complex platform or even in a platform like Gmail, for example, or any email inbox. You can tweak settings. Usually there's at least like 4, 5 to 10 settings. In Gmail, there's 10 settings that you can change to really reduce the amount of visual clutter. And it also reduces the amount of features that you see. Therefore, you're a lot less overwhelmed. You have, your eye goes straight towards subject line. You're not like bombarded by text, and then your brain doesn't have to process all that kind of stuff. So yeah, digital nesting is really the process of getting into a digital space, trying to understand what it is that you need from the space, how you tend to behave in the space, and then modifying the environment so that it really adapts to you.
So good. And how many people right now are like, I didn't know I could do that. And I'm sure you hear that a lot. I didn't know I could do that. So we just kind of go with what's given to us. And I like to talk about energy leaks with my clients. There's times like where we're avoiding a conversation and that's an energy leak, or we are, putting something off that we have to do and that's an energy leak. But all this, like opening your Gmail and having it just flooded with stuff, or all the digital distractions, those are all energy leaks that we could conceivably streamline. So I'm hearing you say, let's get streamlined. What do you help your clients understand on the path towards streamlining?
Mm. Well, first of all, you need to understand what your goal is. It's like, for example, when you're manifesting, right? You need to understand what do you want? What's your vision? So in a digital space, the same thing kind of occurs where it's like, what is your vision when you enter a space, right? What do you want from your inbox when you enter it? Do you want to see everything going on at once, or do you just want to, like how do you want to behave when you're in your inbox? That's
Mhm.
really important. The second thing is it's we might talk about it more later, but like visual cues is extremely important. And so, when I explain what I do, I put emphasis on I'm not just organizing digital spaces, but I really help people to design their digital spaces, to make them more visually playful, to make sure that when they step into a space, it reflects them. And we do that with colors, with even emojis, and it sounds like a childish thing to add emojis, but really what we're doing is we're adding a visual cue. And for example, it takes 250 milliseconds for your brain to process 2 words. It takes 13 milliseconds to process an image or a color. So that's what we want to do. We're talking about energy leaks. It's like tiny energy leak every time you have to process word after word after word after word.
Right.
250 versus 13 milliseconds. That's a lot of energy that we're saving considering the scale at which we're seeing all of these words appear on the screen versus emoji that you can just be like, oh, that emoji signifies this to me. And so your brain doesn't even need to do the work. It's just like, I know what that is.
Wow. So when you work with people, and we're going to talk about sort of flexible time management and these visual cues, but sort of set the table for us, like we're about to work together. What are some of the things that you're going to want me to evaluate about my digital space to help get to whatever the end goal is? Does that
Okay,
make
that's
sense?
yeah, that's a really good question actually. So the first session that my clients have with me, we do this big brain dump of everything that's going on in what I call their digital ecosystem. Because what's important for me to understand is not just I can't just go into your inbox or go into your calendar and just look at that one space.
Right.
I need to really understand what is your entirety of your digital process and your digital ecosystem look like. You are a human, what is going on in your life as well. So you're not just a business owner. Are you a parent? Are you a caretaker? Are you in a relationship? What are your responsibilities in your life?
Love
Because I'm
that.
not organizing businesses. I'm organizing the human behind the business. I'm helping support that human. Um, so that's a really big thing is to understand the entirety of everything. Um, and then from there, what we do once we have everything, we look at what the priorities are. Where is the first space that's going to make the biggest impact to organize? And usually that's the calendar. Because if we start, let's say, for example, organizing assets and files, that will take time, right? Like they'll have homework after the session, and it'll take time, but we haven't made time yet. So the first thing we do is we look at their time management, we look at their calendar, and we try to make time in their calendar. That way, the work that they do with me, we're actually making more time from the get-go. And then we have more time to, really chip away at the other digital spaces afterwards.
So good. So what you just said sort of leads us naturally into this concept of flexible time management. What is it that you want us to know about how to create that flexible structure?
Mm. Well, so this is a mistake that a lot of people make when they try to get organized. And this is whether it's like for files, inboxes, calendar, but it's very visual on a calendar because
Mm-hmm.
you live it out, right? It's a visual representation of your time. And so when you try to be too rigid and life happens, just everything falls through. And then you end up losing the confidence that you have in yourself for keeping what's on your calendar. And so what I have people do is you set up going forward what you want, what your what your intention is with your time. But
Mm-hmm.
we don't stop there because typically people will stop there. They'll be like, I intend to do this with my time, and then they'll run through their day, and then some things will be skipped, but then they'll leave that on their calendar as it was, as they intended to do it, but they didn't actually do what's on their calendar. And that's the mistake. So what I have people do is I have them actually modify it according to what they actually did. And that's a really important thing that happens with your own trust with yourself, because when you do modify that, you're like, okay, I actually did this with my day. And then you understand, like, sure, you missed a few things, but instead of having those things that you missed on your calendar still be there, you have what you
Kind of
actually
like
did.
nanny, nanny,
Yeah,
nanny.
exactly.
Like every time you
Exactly.
see like, oh, and I didn't do that, but every time I open my calendar, it's right there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so it's like move it to a time where you can actually probably do it, still with the intention, but what you actually did, put it there, because I'll have, especially like, um anyone is everyone, but anyone who either takes care of kids or taking care of the house or whatever, it'll be like, I intended to, do some business development in the afternoon, but I didn't do it because the laundry came up or I had to go pick up my kids. And it's like, okay, but did you put that on your calendar though? Because if you don't, and all you have on your calendar is the thing that you missed, you're going to feel like a failure at the end of the day. Whereas you actually did stuff with your time, you know? And so, like, something that I find is really a useful practice that people can apply, like literally right now. Like if anyone's listening to this right now, what I would have you do is go and put all of your time commitments on your calendar. That's a really important first step to changing the relationship that you have with your time. So a lot of people will, the things that you remember to do, like you'll remember to go pick up your kids. You don't need to put it in your
So you
calendar.
don't put it in your calendar. Okay. But it's a
Exactly.
big chunk off your calendar.
It's a big chunk off your calendar, and what people forget to do too is like add buffer. So it's like visually speaking, if you need to go pick up your child at 4, you might need to like prepare your stuff so like you need a little bit of buffer before. And so if a meeting ends like right before, you're rushing and you're running. And
Mhm.
so putting all of your time commitments there is going to help you, first of all, really visualize the time that you actually have. And it's going to help you understand that you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot more than you think you are. And to not feel like a failure at the end of the day if you didn't get everything done, you're doing a lot.
So a mindset thing, really, to break the negative self-talk that we can get in towards ourselves, the woulda, shoulda, coulda
Yeah.
talk that we get into. It's okay. I had a really full day. I would guess, Jezebel, that that would also help people get more realistic about their time. I don't know about anybody else, but I can sometimes do like I'm going to get these 10 things done in like this period of time. Like that's not even realistic. So
Yeah.
then, and especially if I know that I'm going to have to break to go see a client or pick up my kid, whatever.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things I think would create a more reasonable framework to work within.
Exactly. And then another thing that I have my clients do with this state of mind is have your calendar and your to-do list open at the same time, like on the screen side by side, because your time task ecosystem is something else that you really need to be looking at together and not separately. Because when you're looking at it separately, you might put on your to-do list those 10 things. But if I tell you go put those in your calendar, that's when you realize, like, oh, okay. Yeah, I
That's
see.
really not very realistic.
No.
Excellent. What else about the concept of being realistic about our time management in our life. Anything that we've left out?
Buffers are a really big thing. I touched on that earlier,
Hmm.
but buffers are really not to be underestimated. If something takes half an hour, I put it on for an hour. And if anything, I have extra time, but I don't want to be rushing from one thing to another. That's gonna, and it's like if people think that the more extra filler space you have, the less productive you're going to be. No, because you're giving your brain a little bit of peace of mind. And that's going to make you perform better when you are working, when you are doing something. And especially coaches have a tendency of booking back to back. I've seen a
I
lot of
used to do
coaches
that
do
as a
that.
therapist, and it was exhausting
Yeah, and
and
it's a lot
stress
of
inducing.
oh yeah. Oh
Got
yeah.
somebody who goes into crisis 10 minutes before the session's up, but you know you've got somebody else in the waiting room waiting for you.
Yeah. And you're a human, like you are absorbing all that. You need time
Hmm.
to decompress. You can't just like absorb, absorb, absorb. At the end of the day, you're going to be depleted. So yeah, yeah,
Right.
I see often, I don't know why this is such a format for coaches. Maybe it's like I don't know if this is like a standard in coaching, but it's like the 55-minute coaching call with the 5-minute note taking and then
Yeah,
you
that's
jump
just
right on
not
the
enough.
call. No. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
it's a lot. Yeah.
It's interesting because I just, right before I got on with you, was in a mentor group with a group of new coaches, and one of the coaches said, I just did a session that was directly after a meeting, and now I know that I can't do that. I mean, like sometimes we learn from experience, but it because if you think that you're going to shift immediately and be totally intentional and focused when you've still got leftover from whatever it is, whatever that transition was, you've got to get, especially when you're working with other people, but in
Yeah.
general, what is the buffer, the transition period that you're giving yourself to be able to be your best for yourself and for your
Mhm.
client in that next session?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially to like food. I feel like people forget to eat because it's like when we work on computers, we're not thinking that we need fuel because we're not working physically. But even after, let's say, a 90-minute call, you need to refuel, even if it's just like a little snack or something. But if you don't have enough time in between, you just run right through. And then by the end of that second one, you're depleted. And so it's all about like kind of just feeding yourself throughout the day. That's what the visualization of having everything on your calendar will help you do too, is you look at your calendar. And this is why I say like you can implement this right now. Just put everything that you're doing on your calendar, all of your time commitments on your calendar, because it'll help you visualize like it'll help you also set boundaries to be like, I can't actually say yes to everything. Knowing now visually everything that I have to do, I cannot say yes to everything.
Such a good point. The other good point, or thing that I want to bring up to see how you feel about this is the concept of setting setting parameters around your calendar. So I'll work with new coaches who are so eager for the hours, and we definitely want to build our hours and build our experience that they'll like end up taking clients late in the evening when they're not at their best or and so they have no parameters around their calendar and they end up being depleted because of that. So what do you tell your clients about managing even their available time?
Yeah, that's a good question because you said it. Like when you're new, you want to make sure that you can take everything that you can. So there's that. If someone is really new, what I would suggest, and because maybe someone doesn't even know what their best times are or not, maybe play around with it a little bit.
Mhm.
I know for myself, I used to take clients like really early in the morning, and then I was like, okay, maybe not. Like I do admin really well in the morning, and it doesn't deplete me for some reason. It's like that's my time. And I love taking client calls later in the day. My clients are
Mhm.
in LA and I'm on the East Coast, so it kind of makes sense too. Um, so when you're new, have a maybe set aside like 1 month, for example, when you're like taking calls at different times of the day and just take notice
Such a
though how
good.
you feel. Don't just like go through it and then at the end be like, okay, what did I feel? No, no, like try to every
Yeah.
day understand like, okay, how did I feel? How did I feel about taking a late call? How did I feel about taking them all and all in the same 3 days and having 2 days off? Or like there's so many
Right.
formats that you can play with, especially because everyone that I work with or most people that I work with, I do have some people who have careers or like more 9 to 5s, but typically people who I work with, we are creating our own jobs. We are creating this. And so to kind of have a like to kind of take on like a 9 to 5 just because you think that that's what's best, or to, take calls really late because you think that that's what's best for your clients, just try to understand like what's best for you. You're creating your life here. Don't create the wrong one. Don't create one that at the end you're like, wait, this
That's
feels like
so
a
good.
career to me. Like this feels like I'm working for someone else?
Right. So you will be your best when you honor what's best for you, and your clients will benefit from that. So I
Yeah.
love that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
And people will tell you as well. So say for example, you're like, okay, I only want to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from this time to this time. A client won't just be like, oh, too bad. I can't fit anything in my schedule. Like they will tell you, and then maybe you'll have one client per week who's kind of outside of that range, and that'll be fine. But people will
Hmm.
tell you, they
Hmm.
won't just be like, oh no, too difficult. The schedule doesn't work for me. People can
Right. So I'm
say,
going to go away.
yeah,
And I will tell you that in my experience, and I now have been working with people for like 40 years, so that's kind of embarrassing, but true. So whether it was a therapist or a coach, when I set the parameters and just made available what I could within the parameters that worked either for my childcare schedule, for my personal, whatever it was, people who want to work with you will work with you. They'll figure it out. They'll
yeah,
do their lunch hour. They'll do so. I think sometimes we try to be so flexible to make it work for other people that, to your point, we end up not being true to ourselves, and then we can't bring our best forward.
yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
love your idea of experiment. Experiment, like I'll say to coaches, experiment with the kinds of clients you want to work with. And to Jezebel's point, experiment with the times of day that work best for you, or the kind of cadence that works
Yeah,
best for you with your sessions. Love
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
You can also get like a client management system or a calendar system that puts buffers in. So mine puts, I'll say, if it's an active client appointment, I need 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after. If it's a whatever, then, I can change my buffers, but it has, so sometimes people will say to me, well, this session's beginning at 15 after the hour. Well, that's because it's
yeah,
building in my buffers, and you know what? Yes, it is, and put it on your calendar for
yeah,
that
yeah,
time.
exactly. I'm very
Yeah.
flexible with my not flexible. I'm very generous with my buffers. If I do a 1 hour call, I'll put half an hour in between, and then if I'm doing 2 hour session, I'll put 1 hour in between. And it's nice because I really get to just decompress a lot in between, and
Yeah.
that makes my for me that makes my because I used to take them a lot closer together, and then I'd be
Hmm.
done earlier. But honestly, I kind of like that my day, like I can go quickly to the grocery or like go grab a coffee or whatever, and
Hmm.
like my day doesn't feel like it's just work. I get
Or
some,
inundated with stuff. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It doesn't feel like this is the work day and now it's done. It almost feels like I'm sprinkling regular life into my day, and that's the cadence that
Mhm.
I like, for example.
Love that. Love that. So we've talked about what digital nesting is, kind of opened some people's eyes, I think, to the fact that they have choices where they might not even have known that they had choices. Then we talked about being flexible with your time management so that you're good to yourself and you're good to your clients. And then we really wanted to look at this concept of visual cues. We touched on it a little bit, but I think you've got some great stories about it, or great ways to like build in visual cues and the importance of that. So let me throw it to you around visual cues.
Yeah. So the example that I love to give is like, remember when you were a kid and you had your locker at school and it was gray, right? You didn't just like leave it like that, right? You decorated it, you made it personal. Every time you would open your locker, even though the contents of it would be textbooks and stuff you didn't really want to be doing or learning, you personalized it and you made that space. You remember like the feeling of feeling giddy when you open your locker door and you're like, oh, these are all my little things, like my
This is
fluffy
my
pen, my
stuff.
little mirror. Yeah, you personalize it, you made it your own. And it's a reflection of that, even though the contents are boring or. And so it's the same thing for digital spaces. You'll have places where the contents feel extremely stressful. And I say this because like for example, an inbox is not just an inbox, it's a space of communication. There's communications behind it. There are people wait, there's junk mail, which feels stressful because then, you know, you might miss some actual communications. But then the communications itself, it's not always positive. You know, you have financial things in there. You have, you know, the weight of receiving, like, I don't know, your payment didn't go through and it's like for whatever
Right.
reason, and it's like, ugh, like that's not
Yeah.
cool. That's not a fun thing to receive. And then it's there mixed up with like a cool client opportunity and it's like side by side. That is really weird energetically. And so I love to go the extreme opposite of like what it feels like in that space to counteract that weird energy. I make these spaces look so playful. And the way that I do that, and every client of mine has their own aesthetic. My personal aesthetic for my brand is like early 2000s, very like totally spies, like fuchsia and like purple and like lime green. And so my digital spaces literally look like early 2000s girl tech. And for me, I'm like, this makes me feel so childlike. And it's like I get to open it up and my business literally looks like early 2000s girl tech. It's these are the spaces that I spend time in. So it's as if I've decorated my physical office, but except the screen I'm looking at it actually more than I am looking at my office. So these spaces are extremely, extremely important. And yeah, the way that we do that is colors, emojis. Again, with the settings as well, you can change a lot. Yeah.
So you open and you get sort of this warm fuzzy, even if it's time to work or whatever.
Exactly.
And um, so when you work with clients around creating a space that's pretty to the eye or attractive to the eye, what are some of the things that you would encourage people to think about when they're designing their space?
Mm. Well, first of all, if they have a brand, I encourage them to go with their brand colors because then everything will seem unified. And on the topic of unifying things,
Mm-hmm.
because their digital ecosystem will include 5 to 10 different platforms, making sure that whatever, like, however you're organizing it, whatever categories you have, those categories stay consistent with the naming and with the colors. And then adding emojis, which is hard to on a podcast, it's like hard to verbal, like it's hard to
Right,
explain
right.
without or showing it, right? But essentially what I have, for example, is a system of emojis that I use to help my brain pinpoint what things are. I use that in files, I use that in my to-do, like in my to-do list a lot. And so what that will look like is imagine I have a to-do list, it's just on a note, like the notes app, and I have them separated by the different topics of my life, which is like personal, work, admin, and then each different thing that I'm doing. So say for example, I'm like, I need to email Meg. So that I'll have like little inbox emoji for every email. And so usually on a daily basis, I need to email like 6, 7, 8 people. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'll put those all together, but I'll identify that with the emoji that's in front of it. It's like, you know, and then it'll be like some calls. I'll have the phone emoji. If I need to tweak backend stuff, I'll put like the little gear icon because it's like setting stuff. And so what
Okay.
that helps to do is it helps with task batching. So when you go into your to-do list, you're not just seeing words and you're like, I don't know what order to do this in because these are just all words,
Right.
right? So you're looking and you're like, okay, these are all emails. I'll just boom, I'll hit all the emails at once. And then it's like, okay, all the setting stuff, I'll be in the mindset for that. So I'll just do them all at once. So you're not wasting energy doing like one thing to another to another to another, and that wastes time as well because like the startup time of like doing that.
When you're flipping tasks and then you're flipping sort of the skill set that goes with those tasks versus
Yeah, yeah,
staying efficient.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Love that. Love, love, love that. Um, when you let's think about a client who obviously we're protecting the confidentiality of your clients, but think about a client who was really in a digital mess.
Mhm.
Like there was just what kinds of challenges was that person bringing forward? Because I'm willing to bet there's people who are going to be like, oh, she's talking about me, even though you're not literally talking about her. But what are some of the digital trauma that you deal with?
Well, so I have this particular client actually who was a podcaster, and she almost missed the opportunity to interview someone quite famous. And that I was like, wow, what a case study for what I do, because it's really like opportunities are being missed. And it's obvious when it's those kind of opportunities, but there's a lot of opportunities that people can be missing. And just simply because their inbox is inundated. And this particular client was it was so severe, the inbox anxiety, that there were panic attacks. And so opening the inbox would be like like very like, because she knew there were so many people waiting on a response, and it wasn't just like little response, it was like projects and this and that and like deadlines, and it was like very anxiety provoking. And so that that is a really important reason to manage and take control of the inbox, because it's a space of communication. um, Other things that I see a lot is um, running from one thing to another. I think that's a thing that everyone kind of feels. Um, that's something that I don't want. We shouldn't even have to feel that, because I'm telling you, there is, no matter how much is on your plate, there is a way, even by managing the same amount of things, even without cutting out time commitments, there's a way to just reformulate when you're doing those things, like task batching, for example, that you don't have to be running from one thing to another. It's just about understanding where to put what. And sometimes it's even um it could be in on like a to-do list basis, like what task are you going to do right after the other. It could also be like what time block are you going to be doing one after the other. So putting, for example, all of your housework more on one day versus like you're doing some housework in between your client calls and this and that, that's also a task switch, right? um so those kind of things that are avoidable, it just it makes me so happy when, you know, that aha moment happens, when it's like I get back on a client call and then they're like, I lived out the week that we had organized, and like, whoa. And it's like, yes, there you go, like same amount of stuff, but changing the way that you're doing it, it'll make such a difference.
Oh, that is just empowering and really quite a beautiful testament to what you help people do. As we're wrapping up our time together, Jezebel, I could continue because boy, I could bring all my own, mess to the table, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do instead is to say, what did we leave on the table that you wanted to be sure to cover in today's interview, if anything?
Mm. um I think, and especially when it comes to coaches and entrepreneurs, there's a really big reason to get organized as well. And that comes when you're in your growth phase and you want to grow your business in any shape or form. If you're not organized, that disorganization is going to bring you down. And whether
Mm.
that's taking on, like, I don't know, just if you want to start like doing social media, you know, like you want to start to add things, you are only one person. So if you're not organized, scaling is going to be hard, or onboarding is going to be hard. So if your processes are not um, documented, that's another big thing that we didn't talk about that, but like in like corporate world, we call it like SOPs. Some people
Right.
call it guides, but that's also something really important that as entrepreneurs we need to have in order to not be reinventing the wheel every time.
So how are we capturing our processes? That could be
Yeah,
a whole nother episode, but
yeah.
like you said, what are our standard operating procedures? Because the other thing is that if you get to the place where you're going to hand some things off, you've got to be able to have captured what it is that you do. So, boy, what you do just sort of stretches out and stretches out. Love
Yeah.
that. I appreciate the fact that you spent time with us, A, talking about digital nesting and that we have more power in our digital space than we probably claim.
Hmm.
And how can you create a digital space that really lights you up, that is playful and fun? Because you're going to work anyway, so why not work in a space that lights you up and helps you stay streamlined, because the less chaotic you are and the more streamlined you are, your clients will benefit and you will certainly benefit. So how do you do that? You use visual cues. You think about your time management, the kinds of things that you're telling yourself about your time management. So good. As I mentioned, we're going to have links to connect with you. Tell everybody a little bit about your lifestyle lab.
Yeah, so the Lifestyle Lab is the name of my brand. And basically, there is where I teach one on one sessions. I also have workshops. I have a few free workshops, one of which I had mentioned the 10 settings that you can change in Gmail. It's an 8 minute workshop. It's the wildest thing. Like you'll change the 10 settings and you'll be like, why I cannot believe I've lived my whole life with my inbox looking such a way when it could have looked another.
I
Um,
love that.
so yeah, I have workshops like that. And then I also have classes. I have an inbox organization class and then a calendar class that just came out with in collaboration with Girl Boss. And yeah, those are my offerings that I do on the Lifestyle Lab. I really just want to be able to teach people the skills because another thing is I'm not it's I don't want to set something up for you that you won't be able to manage. So what I really do at the Lifestyle Lab is I want to teach you the skills to manage your own life
Hmm.
because that'll really benefit your whole life is understanding how you can manage your time, how you can manage your assets. That's going to you'll be able to better manage also your physical assets with the mentality of like, okay, there's not just like minimalism, but there's like standardizing things and that we don't really think about standardizing physical things. Anyway, now I'm going off on a tangent. I could talk about
No,
organization
it's
all day,
okay.
but
But it just it kind of shows the wealth of knowledge that you have regarding this. So if you want to know more about Jésabel, the things she does, the lifestyle lab, be sure to, if you're watching us on YouTube, grab the links right below this video. If you're listening on all the platforms that the Star Coach Show is on, go to the show notes at starcoachshow.com and grab all of those links. Jésabel, it was absolutely awesome to have you on the show.
thank you so much.
And for all of you listening, remember the Star Coach Show comes out every Wednesday with a new episode about strategies, tools, and resources to help you as a coach, to help you as a leader. We are all here on the earth together to do the heavy lifting together. So be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And until next week, this is Meg Rentschler wishing you the very best for your success. Have a great day.